Hello, everyone. Today we have the privilege to have the presence of Miss Martha Wells, one of the biggest authors right now, and for over 30 years now in fantasy and science fiction. She has won numerous awards, Nebula, the Hugo, and the Locus, and I'm sure a bunch of other awards that I'm not going to be able to remember right now. She's well known right now for the Murderbot series, who is being published here in Brazil. It took a lot of time, but it's finally here. And for the TV show adaptation of the books. First of all, Martha, we have this tradition in the podcast I like to begin by telling the person that I'm talking to that you are free to curse as much as you want here. You don't have to.
Okay.
I don't know if you're a very cursy person, but you're allowed to curse as much as you want. And so we can make you feel at home, we would like to know what's your most used curse word.
It's probably a toss up between fuck or
Fuck or shit are good curse words because you can use it in a bunch of different situations.
Yes, they work for everything.
So we can get to know you a little bit better. We would like to know, what was your gateway into the fantasy and science fiction genres? What was the first thing that got you into it?
It was probably when I was a kid. That was back in the early 70s when you didn't have cable TV in the US and certainly not satellite or anything like that. And so we just had the local TV station, the 3 or 4 networks, including PBS. And so I would watch, we had one independent station that would show a lot of old movies, like the old scary movies and old 50s science movies and things like that. And then they'd also show reruns of TV series like Lost in Space and Land of the Giants and the one with the sea view, the submarine and everything. So, and the Godzilla movies. I watched the old Godzilla movies. And also for reading, when I was the library we would go to when I was a kid had the science fiction section right next to the children's section. So I didn't know there was any difference. I would just go back and forth between them. So I started reading and watching some fantasy very early.
I actually, while preparing for this interview, I heard the story that you, on the public library, I think, you by accident went to the fantasy and science fiction genre, and the covers of the books, they caught your attention. And I was wondering, because you said that the fact that it had female characters in the covers, that was interesting to you. And I was wondering, how was that experience, and how do you see today the science fiction and fantasy genres as spaces that welcome different kinds of people and not necessarily only men?
I think it's better now. It's certainly better now than when I first started out. As in probably an active fan in the 80s, and then as a professional in the early 90s. It's certainly a lot better because, because you can always find certain spaces that are welcoming, particularly ones with a lot of women when you're a woman. And there were fans of people of color who were fans and writers, from the beginning, basically. But now I think as somebody who's been in the field for about 30 years, I think the progress is finally more visible, at least to me. And I'm sure young people who come in, have a completely different view of it because, it's really, really bad. But I hope people sort of take heart from the progress we feel like we've made and keep pushing for more progress.
I do believe that now we have a field that is more welcoming, and I'm happy to see that we have a bunch of creators such as yourself that are both women and people that are non-white. So we have a lot of different voices writing here in Brazil. I think that the majority of science fiction and fantasy writers are women, which is something that I find amazing, and I think that it helps to change the landscape a lot. Well, I really wanted to talk to you about this book because I think it's amazing. I don't know if you have a Brazilian copy. I believe you probably do over there.
I probably think.
Yeah, and we just got published the second volume here in Brazil. And I really wanted to talk to you about it because, well, like I said before we started recording, I'm a huge fan. And I think that you do something that is amazing. I'm not a writer myself, but I do find it hard sometimes as a reader to read humor and action, to have a good picture of what the action sequences are, or to actually laugh at what's being reading. But I believe that you're amazing at both of them. I laughed a lot during the book while reading your books, and I have a pretty clear image of the action when you're describing it. So I would like to know if you have maybe a process to let you know that you are actually being funny, if you're trying to be funny, and if you have something that reassures you that the person that is reading your action sequences is going to understand it.
For the humor, I think the best is when I make myself laugh. But sometimes, excuse me, sometimes I'll do stuff and I'm not meaning to be funny, or I think it's mildly funny and people will think it's really funny. So it's just, it's an uncertain thing, because I've seen people too who didn't think the books were funny at all, who thought they were very serious. And you're like, well, what about, this part? And, so yeah, it's, been a big debate with the TV show. Yeah, when I write the action sequences, a lot of it is just, a lot of experience over the past years writing action sequences. But one of the things I do is just stick really tightly with the character, with the point of view character, because that character, when you're actually in a fight, you don't need to know everything that's going around you, and you're not focused on that. You're focused on what you're doing and what might be coming at you. And so that's the way I write the scene. And if anything happens, if it's a large fight with a lot of people involved, if anything happens during, the reader doesn't need to know all that, because the point of view character doesn't need to know it. If they do need to know anything, I have the point of view character find that out afterward of what happened. But when the scene is actually occurring, that, and that helps, and because it's confusing to me too, trying to write a scene with a bunch of people in it. And if it's confusing to me, it's going to be confusing to the reader. So you want to make sure you understand what's going on, and it's really focused on that point of view character. The problem with Murderbot is Murderbot can see all different angles through all these different cameras and get information from all of these systems as these fights are going on. So I have to use that in the scene, so that makes the scenes a lot more complicated. So again, it's mostly focused on making sure I understand very well what's happening, and so I can make the reader understand.
Well, first, a little comment. When I saw the trailer for the TV show, the series adaptation, one of the best things that I saw, it was that it kept the humor, because I was a little bit worried it would be too action-packed. And it has a lot of action, but it kept the humor, because for me, it was a big part of the reading experience. The quirky personality of the robot, and how it has a dry sense of humor. And I'm very glad that the show is keeping that very strong. And one other thing that I saw while I was getting ready for this interview is that All System Red was supposed to be a short story or a novella. I don't recall. So with a sad ending, and I was wondering how much of the initial world building of that novella short story you kept, or how much did you have to put after that?
I decided, because it was originally going to be a short story with a sad ending, and then as I was writing it, I don't like sad endings, and I thought it needs to be longer, for one thing. And actually, it is novella length. The short story is usually 7,000 words or under 10,000 words, and a novella is more like between 30 and 40,000 words. And so that gave me more room to tell the story. And There's more room to tell the story. And also, I realized pretty quickly I did not want to make it a sad ending. So I didn't know what the ending was going to be until I actually got there. But I knew I wasn't going to kill off Murderbot, which was the original ending of the short story. But yeah, so I didn't have to change a lot of the world building. I tend to develop it as I go along. So what I'd done already worked, and I could already feel the way I was doing the characters and the things I was coming up with were really better suited to a slightly longer story and a different ending.
One other thing that I really enjoy about the book series is how it talks about the impact of media in understanding the reality, on communicating with others. You have the Murderbot that uses media as a way of communicating and understanding kind of the real world. And you see how the media inside the book series is used to depict AI and constructs. And I was wondering, first of all, your thoughts on this, on media representation, and if that impacts the way that you write your stuff.
Yeah, I think that we've had a lot of shows kind of focus on robots and sentient robots. I think it mostly sentient robots, because I guess non-sentient robots aren't really fun to write about or watch. And though there's been some really interesting, I don't know if you have the TV show Elementary down there, the one with it's Sherlock Holmes and Joan Watson. That's a modern day thing. They did a really interesting episode with a murder supposedly committed by an AI. And that was predicated on their belief that this is, you can't have an artificial intelligence at this time. It has to be a person that manipulated this. And so that was a really interesting episode. And they dealt pretty realistically with what that would be like. It's like you can't, there's currently no sentient machine intelligence. So that was interesting to me. And so, but most of what I think the media we see is again focused on sentient machines, and it's been done so differently over the years, either for comedy or done seriously. And I think there's been some really good stuff lately about it. But one of the things I wanted to do with Murderbot was kind of try to show what a machine intelligence would really want, as opposed to what a human thinks it would want. And I think that's been dealt with a little bit in media before I did it, but it's certainly been dealt with quite a lot in books. But for movie and TV, I don't think, they're sort of edging up on it that maybe a sentient machine intelligence would not want what a human wanted, and sort of like starting to grapple with that. But it's kind of hasn't been done very much lately.
In All System Red, I really love how you show that all it takes is willingness to understand and to help. You see the people from the Preservation Alliance, they really want to help Murderbot, and they make mistakes, and they find a way to understand it needs, the way that it feels about itself and how it feels uncomfortable by dealing with some types of interactions. And in the show, they have done that very well as well. They try to, sometimes they want to help, but they kind of force some kind of stuff that it doesn't feel comfortable, but then they kind of go back to it. And I think that that's amazing because, first of all, the way that you deal with a genderless protagonist, it's sensitive, and it's kind of, it's important today, because I think that we're so used to the male or female protagonist that it's going to end up having a love situation. And I think that your approach is different, and I wanted you to speak on it a bit, and how having a genderless protagonist impacted you on the process of writing, because a big part of the narrative today is the love part, and well, the romantic love, the traditional one. And so how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think, when I was first writing the character, it just became really obvious that it wasn't going to have a gender, because the company that made it was not going, if it wasn't a comfort unit or a sex bot, it wasn't going to be given a gender, a biological sex or anything. And that as a person, I wanted it to kind of embrace that, and because it doesn't, it doesn't find anything to do with sex or gender particularly appealing, or appealing at all, really. And so I think the characters are more understanding of that, because that's something, and it's been just within the last, I think 10 or so years, maybe 20 years at the outside, that we have, as a culture, have started to understand that all people are different, and gender is a spectrum, the way sexuality is a spectrum. It would seem really, when you think about it, it would seem really weird for sexuality to be a spectrum and gender not to be. Those two things kind of like are linked together in a lot of ways. So, and I think that I wanted to show basically a world where that's not unusual. That's not the thing that the characters have trouble understanding, because that's something that's common for humans too. And so many shows, science fiction shows of romance, and you can't separate the genres in a lot of ways, because so many science fiction and fantasy include a romance, and include mysteries. It's all kind of, people try to separate the genres, but they're really all, they kind of clump together a lot. But I think it's also interesting for a TV show, and it's fairly rare, I think, to do this, that the characters are what they're developing are close friendships and platonic relationships rather than romances, which is actually another thing I liked about Elementary. There's no romance between the main characters. It's a very close friendship.
While I was reading the books and now seeing the adaptation of The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon, there was something always in my mind, and I finally have the opportunity to ask you, what's your current Sanctuary Moon? What's the TV show that does that for you?
Well, right now it's kind of Murderbot, I guess. I'm enjoying it. It's not that I've seen it in pre-production and I've seen it in post-production, and now I'm watching it as it comes on Apple. And it's just really, I just really enjoy it, the whole thing. But for other shows, I've had a lot of different Sanctuary Moons over the years. I think I haven't had one really specifically in a long time, is because so much of the TV now, it used to be like 24 episodes per season, and now it's going into 8 or 10 episodes, or sometimes only even 6 episodes. And so I guess it's hard to form a relationship with a TV show when it's only that many episodes. But I think it's a comfort watch. There's different shows. Only Murders in the Building. Really love that one. I've always been a big Stargate fan, so Stargate Atlantis was one of my big comfort shows for a long time. British mysteries. There's a lot of different British mysteries, and they're also really doing the ones that are sort of more tailored to cozy mysteries, which is always really a weird concept, since, okay, someone's murdered, but it's cozy, which makes no sense and has never made sense from the beginning. But and there's a lot of weird stuff about mysteries and the way they started out this sort of weird to unpack. But it is interesting to watch, and it's really the prevalence of funny mysteries. I kind of like the funny mysteries where they still acknowledge the fact that this person was murdered, and that's bad. It's not good. And it is not humorous. When it's too humorous, I kind of have a problem. I'm not very interested in those. But that's the kind of shows I like. And good science fiction. Oh, The Expanse. That was a great show. Really enjoyed that one. And Yeah, there's just been so much. It feels like there's been more good TV in these past years. I guess the prevalence of streaming does help that, because shows that are shorter or focused on one story or from a book or something have a lot more chance to get made now than they ever did back with broadcast TV.
Yeah. And on talking about the adaptation, and this is gonna be kind of a spoiler, but well, if some the people that are watching don't have read the other books that are coming, this is the warning. Is there any particular moment on the series that you really hope to see on the screen, that you're anxious to see?
Well, I've seen it all already, and I know it's there. But with the first season, there were several different moments, and they're all in there. And one was the moment where Garathan reveals that Murderbot has been watching Sanctuary Moon, and they have the scene where Rati asks it, what about this part with the solicitor's baby? And Murderbot replies, and it's obviously, yes, Murderbot is watching it. And I love that they did that scene. And there's one coming up with the Garathan says, can we, so we could, hurt you by just staring at you, and it says, yeah, right up until I realize I have guns in my arms. And yeah, and I love that there's so many lines in there that they put in there that directly from the book that I really liked. If we have other seasons, if we're able to have other seasons, I kind of with everything being as it is, I kind of doubt we'll make it all the way up to network effect, but I would really like to see the whole thing with art and network effect and that play out and how that would look on TV. But that's we don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Yeah. Well, and you said you talked a little bit about it, but I thought that it was amazing how you did something that it's different than what's used to do with robots. That it's usually robots have this on fiction, more in TV and movies. The robot wants to be human or wants to be accepted by human. That's like a trope. We have that Pinocchio. We want to be humans, and this is not the case with Murderbot. He doesn't want any contact with humans, and he doesn't act on what we would understand in humans' desires. And you can see that by reading it. I was wondering, how do you write something that it's kind of against our humanity in some way? Because I believe that I'm not a writer, but if I would write something, I don't think that I would be creative enough to write something that it's something that it's not natural to me. But you did that with Murderbot. Sometimes while reading it, I see the strangeness of the way that he sees things, and it's amazing. So how do you come about? Is it something active that you do, or you're just like him in some ways?
I think in a lot of ways I'm just like the character. But a lot of it is I really, especially in these past 10 years or so, I really like to write alien characters. And so you kind of have to, it's kind of like writing a human character who's different from you. You just have to think about their perspective and their physicality and how they're different from you, and extrapolate from that. It's the same way with an alien character. It's like their physical body is, the more different it is from a human, the more it's going to affect how they think and what they do and how they see things. I think that's something you kind of learn very early as a writer, that when you're writing people with different capabilities than you, it's like if you're like a small person with like asthma or something, you're not going to be able to, your solutions for problems are going to be inherently different from a large person who can fight and has all this more experience. So even little differences like that you have to really think about. And so when you're writing a character that's alien or very different, or, like a machine intelligence, you kind of just have to really try to step outside yourself and think about what they would want and what they would be like. So that's what I was trying to do. And also it turns out my thinking apparently is just more different than I thought it was.
Well, you're an author with over 30 years of experience. You have a bunch of novels published and short stories and novellas. And sadly, here in Brazil, we are way late on the publishing industry of outside. So we only have 3 books published by you here. We have the 2 first volumes of Murderbot and your Star Wars Razorblade, I think it's in English.
Yeah, Razor Edge or something like that.
Those are the only 3 books that we have from you here. And I'm going to ask you kind of like an unfair question, maybe a little bit dumb, but if you could choose your next book publisher in Brazil, which one would you, of any of the books you read?
I think it would be either Witch King, which is the most recent fantasy, or it would be The Cloud Roads, which is the first book in my previous fantasy series, which was the Books of the Raxura. And I think either, because I'm really proud of both those books. Whoa, stop. Sorry.
That's okay, it's fine.
So yeah, either one of those 2 books.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'll send it to the publisher. So
yeah,
let's see what we can do about it, because I'm really excited to see more of your stuff finally coming here, because that's my perception, at least. I've seen a lot of people talking about your books here. Finally, like it was, I believe, a big success. A bunch of people from Instagram and TikTok and YouTube are making reviews and talking and making a lot of stuff. So that's a good sign that people are enjoying it. That's the metric that we have now. That's how we know that something is going well. So I hope that not only the publisher that already is publishing you, but others maybe pick up on your stuff. And now we're gonna go to the end of the interview. I don't like to hold you too much here. I know that you're busy. So we have a little dynamic here at the end where I just ask simple questions. You don't have to justify your answer, but if you want, you can, okay? So name an author, dead or alive, that you would like to have a coffee with.
Mary Shelley.
That's a good one. A fictional character that you would like to do the same.
Probably Nicholas from The Death of the Necromancer, cheating by naming one of my own characters.
One fictional universe that you would like to live in.
I think Star Trek. Later period Star Trek is really... It's one of the few where you can just have a normal life somewhere and not worry about anything.
Yeah. It seems to be very comfortable. A lot of technology, you could cure from all diseases, and so I would love it.
Yeah.
Well, Lord of the Rings or Narnia?
Lord of the Rings.
Star Trek or Doctor Who?
Doctor Who. God.
Star Wars or Dune?
Star Wars.
Alien or Predator?
Alien.
Blade Runner or The Terminator?
Blade Runner.
Martha, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I try to keep it short so I don't take a lot of your time. I know it was hard because you're very busy, and I really understand. I'm very happy that your books and the TV show are a big success, and I'm very sure that a lot of Brazilian people are going to love to see your input on everything. So we can wrap it up. I would like you, if you can, to send a message to your Brazilian fans. I'm sure that they're going to love it.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me and on the show. And it's really exciting to me that my books are getting into Brazil. And finally, and I hope that everyone enjoys Murderbot. And I hope if I get anything else down there, I hope they enjoy that too.
Okay. Thank you guys that listened to this interview. See you next time. Take care.